In a small town nestled among the hills, an eerie phenomenon began to unfold. It all started when a mysterious TV channel mysteriously appeared on the screen of every television set in the town. The channel broadcasted the most terrifying horror movies and TV shows, but what was even more chilling was that whatever happened on the screen seemed to come to life the next day in the lives of the town's residents. At first, people brushed it off as a strange coincidence, but as the days went by, the horrifying events depicted on the TV began to manifest in the town. People reported seeing shadowy figures lurking in the darkness, strange noises echoing through the streets, and unexplainable disappearances of their loved ones. The town was gripped with fear as they realized that they were living in a real-life horror show. No one knew how to stop the cycle of terror that seemed to be controlled by the malevolent force behind the cursed TV channel. One family, the Johnsons, found themselves at the center of the nightmare. They had always been avid fans of horror movies, but now their obsession had turned into a living nightmare. Every night they would gather around the TV to watch the latest horror show, only to dread what awaited them the next day. As the horrors grew more intense, and the line between reality and fiction blurred, the Johnsons knew they had to find a way to break the curse. They delved into the history of the town, desperate to uncover the dark secrets that had brought this curse upon them. But as they dug deeper, they realized that the curse was far older and more powerful than they could have ever imagined. They were trapped in a twisted game of life and death, where every decision they made could mean the difference between survival and damnation. In a final, desperate attempt to break the curse, the Johnsons made a daring decision. They confronted the source of the curse head-on, risking everything to save themselves and their town from the horrors that had consumed them. As the TV flickered and went dark, the curse was finally broken, and the town was free from the grip of the malevolent force that had plagued them. But the Johnsons knew that the horrors they had faced would haunt them forever, a reminder of the thin line between reality and fiction, and the power of the supernatural forces that lurked in the shadows. And as they looked back at the TV, they wondered if the curse had truly been lifted, or if the nightmares would return to haunt them once more. It was a dark and stormy night, and Sarah sat alone in her dimly lit living room, eagerly tuning in to the latest episode of her favorite horror TV series. The eerie music and chilling atmosphere drew her in, sending shivers down her spine as the story unfolded on the screen. As the suspenseful plot thickened, Sarah couldn't help but feel a creeping sense of unease wash over her. The characters' terrified expressions mirrored her own growing fear, and she found herself peeking over her shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows of her own home. But it wasn't until a particularly harrowing scene played out on the TV that Sarah heard a faint whisper coming from the darkness behind her. Her heart raced as she strained to make out the words, but the voice was just barely audible, taunting her with its chilling presence. She tried to shake off the feeling of dread, convincing herself that it was just her imagination running wild. But as the episode drew to a close, the whispers grew louder, closer and more insistent. Sarah's pulse quickened, her palms grew clammy, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was looming just out of sight. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging Sarah into complete darkness. Panic gripped her as she fumbled for her phone, illuminating the room with its cold, blue glow. And that's when she saw it, a figure standing in the corner, its eyes gleaming in the eerie light, a malicious grin spreading across its face. Terrified, Sarah tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. The figure began to glide towards her, its movements unnatural and haunting. She was frozen in terror, unable to move as the whispers grew deafening, filling her mind with dread and despair. Just as the figure reached out for her, the lights flickered back on, and the room was empty once more. Sarah was left shaken and breathless, the horror TV show forgotten. As she struggled to make sense of what had just happened, from that night on, Sarah couldn't bring herself to watch horror TV alone. The images from that fateful evening continued to haunt her, a dark reminder of the thin line between the fictional scares on the screen and the very real terrors that lurked in the shadows of her own home. In the dead of night, when the rest of the world was fast asleep, a young couple sat huddled on their couch, transfixed by the flickering images on their television screen. The show they were watching was a horror anthology series that promised to bring nightmares to life. Little did they know, the true horror was about to unfold in their very own living room. As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the room grew thicker, the couple too scared to look away from the screen. The stories being told were twisted and macabre, each one more chilling than the last, and yet they couldn't tear themselves away. Drawn in by the eerie glow of the television set, suddenly a strange noise echoed through the room, causing the couple to jump in their seats. They tried to brush it off as just their imagination, but the feeling of unease lingered. As they continued to watch, the images on the screen seemed to blur and distort, taking on a sinister quality that sent shivers down their spines. Just then the power went out, plunging the room into darkness. The couple sat frozen in fear, the silence ringing in their ears. And then, slowly but surely, they began to hear whispers, soft, barely audible voices that seemed to be coming from all around them. As they strained to make out the words, a figure materialized in the corner of the room. It was a spectral presence, its eyes glowing with malevolence as it advanced towards them. The couple screamed in terror, scrambling to escape, but it was no use. The horror from the TV had come to life, and there was no escaping its clutches. And so, as the first light of dawn broke through the windows, the young couple's lifeless bodies were found, twisted and contorted in a grotesque mockery of peace. The horror TV had claimed its latest victims, leaving behind a trail of terror that would haunt the living for years to come. So beware, dear reader, for when you gaze into the abyss of the television screen, remember that sometimes the true horror lies not in the shadows on the screen, but in the darkness that lurks within us all, and once unleashed, it can never be contained.